All right, so we're going to get started here. So, good morning. I'm Amy Clausen with the Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum, and this is the first talk in our 2025 virtual lecture series. We're going to be recording today's lecture. You probably just got that notification, and it will be put on our YouTube channel. So, if for whatever reason you might have to leave today before the end of the talk, if you're registered, you'll get the link sent directly to you in your inbox. But we also send it out in our weekly e-blast. If you don't get those, please sign up on our website. And we also post it on our social media so you can check for that later. And you can share it with your friends as well. If you want to support any of our virtual lectures or free programming like this, or any of our museum programming and exhibitions, I'm going to put a link in the chat box for donations as well. And we always appreciate that. So thank you so much. So our current exhibition is called The Prettiest Town Beyond the Bricks and Mortar, and we're looking at the history of some of Niagara-on-the-Lake's most historic homes and properties over the last year. And so today we've got Linda Fritz with us, and we decided to do our lecture series, virtual lecture series this year, all about some of the homes that people ask us about the most throughout the year. Some of these houses have been in the paper recently, so we just thought we'd give you a little bit more information. Linda Fritz today is going to be talking about Glencairn Hall from Queenston. And Linda is a University of Saskatchewan librarian emer Emerita. I can never say that word. She and her husband have lived in Queenston for the last 15 or so years. And in 2010, she was invited to oversee the Queenston contribution to the book From the Mouth of the Lower Niagara River, which is about the four communities along the lower part of the Niagara River. It's a great book. We have it, a few copies left still here in our gift shop, and it's a real popular one. She served on a number of boards of directors of cultural organizations, including the Weir Foundation Riverbrink Art Museum, and she's currently on our board here at the Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Linda. Welcome, and thanks for coming today.
Well, thank you, Amy. This is a pleasure for me to do this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I first learned about Glencairn Hall. One of the great things about living in Queenston is there's wonderful, wonderful walks along the parkway. And I remember walking down there and seeing something called Porter's Pleasure, and I had no idea what it was. Well, when you come around, that's in the service road. When you come around and walk along the parkway, you see this sign, this tiny, tiny little sign in the stonework, Glencairn Hall. Now, let me give my thanks to these various and sundry people. This is an impossible thing to write about. There's so much history. These are people who have been useful to me. There are all sorts of books. If you get a copy of this, you'll get to see them. Okay, so who is the most famous family from Queenston? It is the Hamilton family. The Hamilton family was founded by Robert Hamilton. John Hamilton is his son by his second wife, Mary Herkimer McLean, whom he married in 1797. So John is a half-brother to Robert, Alexander, and George. Alexander was the guy who built Willowbank, and the city of Hamilton is named after George. So John himself was born in Scotland. He died in he was born in Scotland in 1802. He died in Kingston, Ontario in 1882. With his brother Robert, he founded a shipping company that connected Queenston to Toronto and the East. That shipping company ended with the War of 1812. However, in 1824, he built a steamship company in the area known as Deep Hollow on the Niagara River. This was destroyed by an ice jam in 1825, so less than a year later. By 1829, John was a part of the consortium to build the Welland Canal. In the meantime, he recouped and founded the Niagara Dock Company in 1831. The Niagara Dock Company was responsible for putting the Royal Mail onto the Great Lakes. Now, one of the things that's worth noting is that Queenston was early, possibly the first post office to ship internationally. So that is an important part of our history. We've still got a little tiny post office in the village, and we're reluctant to let it go for boxes because it matters to us. By 1831, John was appointed to the Legislative Council of Upper Canada. In 1841, he was on the Legislative Council of the United Canada, and in 1867, when Confederation happened, he was in the Senate. In all, he served for 51 years in government. He was also the co-founder of Queen's University. So of the Hamilton family, the Willowbank family tended not to be able to get very far, but John certainly did. Okay. Willowbank, now I'm off. Glencairn Hall was built by John Latshaw. John Latshaw was a master builder from Niagara Falls in Upper Canada. He was born in 1806 in the United States. He died in 1883. He also built Willowbank. He moved to Drummondville, Ontario, Upper Canada, in 1828. In 1829, he built his first house in Niagara Falls. At the time, he was not known as an architect. He was known as a house joiner, which is another word for carpenter. By 1834, he had become a Canadian citizen, and his career as an architect was on a rise. He also became a major landowner, and he built buildings all over the Niagara Peninsula. In 1870, he was the county architect for Welland County. Okay. The style of the building is Greek Revival. It's 2 stories, as you can see in this picture, and has 6 Doric and 6 Ionic columns, so they're following very much the Greek. It was originally clapboard siding, but not. They've improved it today. Today it contains 20 rooms, 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 4 powder rooms, 11 fireplaces, although originally there were 9, and it has 2 kitchens. Jean Huggins, who is a writer, a journalist who was based here in Queenston at one stage, described it as, in 1956 as just like a Southern mansion. She did that in the St. Catharines Standard. John Hamilton occupied the house for only 10 years. He moved to Kingston, where he started the shipping along the St. Lawrence River, adding to his business over the Great Lakes. The next owner was, oh, sorry, I've got several pictures here to show you. That's the view from the river. Okay, this is the next owner, William Thompson. He bought the house in 1866. He was a railway owner, a politician, and a promoter. His railway was the Erie and Niagara Railway, and that provided a daily round trip between Buffalo and Niagara-on-the-Lake. Like his predecessor, he was born in Scotland, and he apparently was responsible for the naming of the house. He considered the cairn in front of the house as a traditional Scottish landmark. He too was a parliamentarian from 1872 to 1878. He told the House of Commons in 1876, "The cause of our troubles has been that our laws have been made to suit the merchants instead of the producing classes." He recommended more public works, lower tariffs, where have we heard that, and above all, an issue of irredeemable government notes to assist farmers and other producers of real goods. So he was a real pusher for making this country work for people. The next person to own the house was a man named Bronson Case Rumsey. He bought the house in 1888. He too was a railway entrepreneur from Buffalo. Most of his wealth was inherited from his father, and he shared it with his brother, who was named Dexter. He also founded a bank, the M&T Bank. Locations can still be found in towns along the American side of the Niagara River. Now, he was the first to use Glencairn as a summer home, and that theme is going to carry on throughout the rest of this presentation, or much of this presentation. Somebody that we have all heard of is John Larkin. He was born in 1845, died in 1926. Another Buffalo entrepreneur. He was a pioneer of the mail order business, so he was quite a busy man, and he was a soap manufacturer. Another bank. He founded the Buffalo Potter and Title and Mortgage Guarantee Company of Buffalo. That's quite a mouthful. He has a huge presence, though, on this side of the river. If you go along the parkway, you've got the Larkin Farms, you've got the Larkin Cottages, you've got his daughter is also responsible for lived in a home along here. He had a famous friend. His name was Frank Lloyd Wright. He visited, we know, in 1905. Um, People have often said, oh, Frank Lloyd Wright was responsible for building some of the houses that Larkin was responsible for. That's not true. The architect that built the Larkin houses was a man named James A. Calvert. He he doesn't get the credit that he deserves because everybody knows of the Frank Lloyd Wright connection. I wanted to show this because this is something that you see a lot along the parkway and along Line 6. This is an example of the kind of house that Larkin built for his workers. Um, it's a cottage. The size is 35 by 38 feet. It's 3 bedroom, 3 closed closets, a dining room, a living room, a kitchen, a front and back porch, a full cellar, and a garden plot. Originally, 24 of these were built. I know of 6 that are still there, and they're changing rapidly. So it's kind of fun to see them along the parkway, and I can certainly understand why people want to renovate older homes. I've been through that myself. Um, but at the same time, they are a heritage piece, and I hope that we can get some pictures of them into the museum. So back to Larkin. Larkin sold Glencairn to his daughter, Ruth L. Robb, in 1923. Ruth's husband had apparently lived in the schoolhouse, which is right next door, and we'll get to that at some point. We will get to that. Next owner was somebody, I'm not sure of the pronunciation of this man's name. I think it's Dr. Jamal Afrukte. I'm not sure of his date of birth. I found an obituary for him, and I'm concluding that it was 1923 that he was born in, and he died in 2012. He owned a lot of properties in the area, and he bought the house in the 1950s. He was a doctor, and he used it as a doctor's surgery, the one side of the house. Now, Afrukte is a really important member of our village. He he was responsible for our library. I don't know if you know our story of our little Queenston Community Library. It's housed in what was the Baptist church. Well, Dr. Afrukte had bought the church and was going to do some form of renovation. He was approached by some women in the village who said that they wanted a library. We weren't getting the service from the Niagara-on-the-Lake Library at the time. So he agreed, and he said that what he did was he would sell the building to the town for $1 if it housed the library. Now, those of you that come to Queenston on a Tuesday afternoon are more than welcome to come into our library. We have coffee, we have juice, we chatter away, we talk about all sorts of things. It's in a nice building, and you can borrow books. So it's a great place. Another thing about Dr. Afrukte, which is worth noting, is that he bought the Riverbend, what is now the Riverbend Inn, in 1972, and he created an art gallery on this site. At the time you could visit, he had started the collection while he was a teenager, and he built an addition onto Riverbend to house the gallery. When he died, it went to the Mount Carmel Spiritual Center in Niagara Falls. So I understand that you can still get in to see it. I knew nothing about this. This is really, really interesting. Next owner was C.Y. of the Oban Inn. This picture was taken when they celebrated their 200th anniversary of the inn in 2024. She bought Glencairn from Dr. Afrukte and used it as a rental property. As you know, her brother is Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong democracy advocate. So anyway, this was kind of a nice touch. She was the owner. These Frank and Jean Porter are the really important people. I think I mentioned that when I first started going down the river, it was Porter's Paradise was a sign that I saw on a tree near the house. And it was Frank and Jean who had bought the house. This is a picture of them doing a renovation. So you get the idea. Uh, Frank, Reginald Frank Porter just died within the last year. Um, he did some wonderful things. Now, let's take a look at some of them. That's Jean. Jean wrote a book that about Glencairn. There are a few mistakes in it, so it it was a read, but our copy at the library has some of the corrections in it. This is what the living room looked like. The house after Reginald Frank Porter died, the house was put on the market for sale, and they had a sale of the furnishings inside. So this is an example of a living room. Now, during Dr. Fructe's time, one side of the house was his doctor's surgery, and the other side was the living quarters. That's not uncommon when doctors had their surgeries within their own homes. This is the other side. You can see they used lots of bright colors. Jean Porter was a decorator, so she used a lot of she used a lot of replicas. Some are period pieces, but there are a lot of replicas that were in the house at the time of the sale. Beautiful, beautiful stairway. This is the upstairs landing. It's just such a pretty, pretty spot. Okay. There are many stories about Glencairn. I tried to pick out some of them. One was, and I can't verify this, but it makes a lot of sense to me, that it was an underground railway terminus during the 1830s. Directly across the river from Glencairn is something called Tryon's Folly. This was a staging house for people who were attempting to get to Canada. There is a story that Josiah Tryon helped the family, helped enslaved people get across the river. What they did was he was a tailor and he made some beautiful coats that were so desired by many, many people. What he did was he designed the coats so that those that were bounty hunters, and they knew who these people were sold distinctive coats that would be recognized by those who were helping the people to escape. So if you saw somebody coming along in one of these coats, the people just were hidden so that they could escape. And you can see from this picture of the fall of Tryon's Folly, it goes down to the riverbank. It just goes down and people could get across the river. I don't know how true that story is. I think it's wonderful. And it makes for a really nice piece of history. Well, not there yet. Okay, another story that I'm going to go back a little bit here, which is, whoops, this picture. There was a movie made here at Glencairn. It was made, it was called Red. It starred Bruce Willis, John Malkovich, Helen Mirren, Morgan Freeman. It was released in 2010, although according to Jean Porter, the shooting of the movie was made much earlier. There is a wonderful scene in there of Helen Mirren sitting right there. There's a lamp beside her, and there's a scene of her just chattering away to the Bruce Willis character, and it was glorious. It was just pretty to know that, hey, I know that house. I've been in there. So it was a really interesting movie. And we're seeing. Okay. During World War I, there were apparently 2 German spies discovered in the area. This was the John Larkin period. And so it was used as a military base during World War I. Not formally. It was one of those things that those in the know realized it was there, but who it was kept quiet, so to speak. Okay, the schoolhouse. When you walk down the parkway, you can see this building. It was built in the late 1830s. It was built for estate workers' children, although a lot of people believe that John Hamilton's own 10 children attended school there. Um, it is clearly not used, but as I said, Ruth Robb's husband lived there for a while. I don't know if she met him there, but that's where he lived. It's still on the property. It's part of the walk to walk down there and just look at this wonderful building. Okay, this didn't come as clearly as I hoped. Vrooman's Battery. Vrooman's Battery was a War of 1812 site. Um, the, this is me now complaining about the Niagara River Parkway people. This faces the road, so you have to go out toward the road to read the sign. If you're walking along the parkway, there's nothing on the other side. You just don't know what it is. It's a lovely cairn. Um, Estate workers have found numerous cannonballs, arrowheads, and coins, according to Huggins, on this area's sites, which the house is right behind. Glencairn is right behind. So, it's there. I'm sure there's lots of treasure still to be found in the place. And it's just a very, very interesting old house. Now, speculation on my part that we're getting to the end of the presentation. So let's go back and have a look at some of these beautiful pictures. Okay. The house has been sold. There are rumors who've bought it. I don't know. I've never had it authenticated. I spend some time in England and a lot of time visiting cities here in Canada. And one of the things I think this house would be wonderful as is a small luxury hotel. If you go to Cambridge, Ontario, you've got um, Langdon Hall, which was a home built in the 1920s for a rich American family, and the grounds in the house are now used as a hotel and spa. In London, Ontario, there's a house called Idlewild Inn that was a large Victorian house built for the mayor of London, Ontario. They make wonderful, wonderful hotels, both of them. They're not cheap, didn't say they would be. But could you imagine coming down to Glencairn along the riverbank and maybe coming in, having your dinner on the porch, getting ready to go out and around, and taking a bike and going along the parkway or going to visit wineries. Anyway, if I were a very, very rich person and this were my house, I would consider doing that. Another feature of the house is it has a huge, huge service area in the basement. Anyone that's seen the movie Gosford Park, again starring Helen Mirren, it reminded me so much of that when I saw it, the big space for staff. Anyway, that's Glencairn Hall. Lots of history, lots of famous names with it. I just want to say thank you for, why don't we just leave it there so that you can see how beautiful it is. This is from the riverside. Okay.
All right, thank you, Linda. I'm just opening up the question and answer box. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in there. The first question from Barbara Worthy is, what happened to the German spies? Do you know?
That was never indicated. I don't know. It was World War I, not World War II, and they were alleged German spies. So they could have just been ordinary people who spoke with a German accent. Who knows?
We're just getting a few things in the chat here. So, hold on. Alexander Stalker says, my great great grandfather was John Larkin. Their daughter, my great grandmother Frances Larkin Esty, summered in a nearby Tudor style house on the river they called Gablesgarth. Do you know if it's still there? And if so, how close to is it to Glencairn?
I can't say for sure about that, but what I do know is that there are two houses along the parkway, very close to Glencairn, that are considered Larkin houses. They're both two stories. They're quite magnificent. It's very possible that one of those is what you're talking about.
And Barbara Van Zanti wanted to know if, well, she said, did you say that Frank and Jean Porter were the most recent owners before the
Yes,
new buyer?
yes, yes.
And Mona wanted to know what got you interested in Glencairn.
Oh my goodness. It's it's part of Queenston's history. It's part of the Hamilton history, and anybody that lives in Queenston and hasn't heard of the Hamiltons has been here only for 3 days. Um, it's a beautiful building. Can I tell another story?
Yeah.
Um, I walk along the parkway most days. There's a house in the same service road that Glencairn is in that's just been built. And I got to chatting quite often with the guy who was the builder. We were standing there one day having a chat, and a guy in a truck came along and said, are you waiting for, and I can't remember the woman's name, because we're going to go into that house at the end because she has to start pricing stuff for the sale. Now, this was the first time that the builder, whose name was Marco, and I had heard about the sale. So Marco and I just stood there and waited for this woman to appear. And we sort of tagged along and went into the house while she was doing the pricing for the thing. So we got to see it. We had a private guided tour, really, with all of the furnishings that the porters had left behind and went downstairs, upstairs. We had a lovely time.
Oh, nice. Francis wanted to know if there was access to the river from the house.
Originally there was. Originally they came up by boat. Keep in mind that when certainly during the 1800s and 19th century, when most of the owners we talked about were living there, that was the mode of transportation. Railways did come in later, but what is the parkway was just a mud road. So yes, there's access from the river.
And Rick Malone was wondering where the original kitchen was located, if you knew that.
I don't know for sure. I think it was in the basement, that large service area. There are two working kitchens in the house right now, but there's an area that looks very much like it could have been a kitchen in that cellar, the concrete cellar. So my guess is that's where it probably was originally.
Doug Monkley, just going back to the Larkin houses, said, yes, they are there. There's three Larkin houses called the Three Sisters, about 500 meters from Glencairn. So there we go.
Ye-
And Bruce Parker wanted to know if the house has ever received any historical designation.
I don't know.
Sorry, I'm just going between the chat and the Q&A because there's questions coming everywhere. Barbara also wanted to know how long CY Lai owned it and if she made any changes during that time.
I don't think she owned it for very long. I'll have to go through here to see. Let me check my notes. Um, Sorry about this.
Oh, that's okay.
Uh, yeah, she bought it from a fructe. So he died in 2012. I don't know when he sold it to her, but it would have been probably in the late 1900s, yeah, late 1900s, early 2000s that she bought it.
I'm getting lots of thank you, Linda. Thank you, Lindas. Um, Elizabeth Oliver Malone just wanted to say that at Willowbank, they have a letter from Hannah Jarvis Hamilton. thanking her sister-in-law, Frances Hamilton, for £1,800 to help save Willowbank as Alexander had died in debt. Frances and her children continued to spend summers at Glencairn from Kingston until John sold it.
Hmm.
And David Servoss says that Glencairn received a heritage designation in April 2024. So that just happened last year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad it's designated because it's a beautiful old building and
Mhm.
it deserves to be looked after.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
staircase alone is just incredible.
Absolutely. Um, and Bob Knight says, is one wing of the house a later addition, which is arts and crafts?
Yes, yes. There's uh a two-bedroom attachment with a kitchen and living room at the far end of the house. Let me see if I can find it. You can I can't there. You can see here. Oh dear. You can see here. This is the addition.
And then Lorraine wanted to know, can you see the house from the parkway?
It's difficult because it's behind the stone wall and it's on the service road. So if you know it's there, you can see it, but it's not right on the parkway. It's on the service road.
Um, Jerome just mentioned that the book John D. Larkin, A Business Pioneer by Daniel Larkin, has a great deal of information about the house on pages 120 to 126. So if anyone can get their hands on that,
Yes, indeed.
I'm sure that's one of those that isn't easily available.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting either walk or bicycle tour to be done looking at the various Larkin properties because
Mhm.
there's a bed and breakfast in Queenston with barns behind that was Larkin. And don't forget the area where the reservoir is up on the top of the escarpment. That was a Larkin farm at one stage.
Apparently, Alexandra says the book is on eBay and Amazon, so you can easily get that there.
Okay,
And if
can I ask you, Amy, if you can get the name of it and maybe share it with us so that we can look for it?
yeah, for sure. Um, uh, they also ask, is Francis Hubbard Larkin's Japanese tea house still on the property?
I didn't see it there.
And then someone's asking if they can visit during the day. It is a private residence, or privately owned.
Yeah,
So I don't know that
it's,
you can.
there's nothing to indicate that it's open. It
Yeah.
was open that weekend of the sale, but I have never seen it open since.
Okay, I think that's it for questions. So thank you again, Linda, for the presentation. Um, Always great to include some Queenston properties, and I know you're always walking about in Queenston and learning more every time you come across something. So thank you for sharing with us today. Our next presentation is next Wednesday, February 12th, again at 11 o'clock. And we've got David Hemmings talking about the Rand Estate here in Old Town. So don't forget to register for that. And we hope you join us again here next week. Thanks again, everybody. And we will send out the recording. And thanks again, Linda.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.